Hi, I'm Michael Kroth, and I'm really honored to be here for Mental Health Monday here at Cathedral of the Rockies. I think it's such an important topic for us to be taking on during these difficult times, and I'm really honored to be a part of this whole process. I'm going to be building on what Megan and Jerry talked about these last few weeks, and actually moving into kind of what I feel are important pieces for those of us who aren't professionals to actually do. I'm not a professional, I'm not a trained therapist, I'm not a minister. I've pretty much learned on my own. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my story as we go along. But I believe in the power of practice. And we'll talk about that as we go through here over the next few minutes. I'm sitting right now in the Kroth Chapel. And the Kroth Chapel is a little sanctuary inside the Cathedral of the Rockies building. And the Cathedral of the Rockies is a big church. And if you've ever been here, you would see a lot of hustling and bustling and people walking around and talking with each other and going into a big service and coming out. And they might be buying lunch bags to give to people who need food, and any number of things which are going on. If you walk in that door right here to my right, your left, if you walk in that door right here, you will immediately walk into a place which is quiet, which will seem sacred, which will seem like a place of solitude and silence. This is the place where we actually have our contemplative practices class each week. At least we did until the pandemic came, because it is perfectly situated for just that kind of work. Contemplative practices, the kinds of things that we do every week. So let's talk a little bit about practices. Why would you think that practices are important? You know, it helps a lot to have beliefs, right? It helps a lot to have beliefs. And let's say you believe that the Mediterranean diet is the perfect diet for you, right? It's the perfect diet. You believe in it, it's good, you know all about it, you've learned all about it. But unless you actually practice eating the Mediterranean diet, it's not going to do you any good. So all the scholarship and all the writing and everything that you know about practices are only as good as the practice that you put into it. Now, there's a couple qualities about practices that I think are particularly important. One is that practices are transformational. They are transformational. They take you from a place where you are to a place where you become. And like many, many important things in our lives, you're never done, right? A practice of knitting, you're never as good as you could ever be. A practice of playing tennis, you're never as good as you could ever be, no matter how much you practice. So practices are a lifetime project, and they're transformational. The second part of that is that, unlike a lot of things that happen to us in life, practices are things that we can do, that we have some power over within ourselves. So instead of looking at all the external forces that are going on in our lives and everything else that's going on, right, which can be overwhelming, we have the ability to start those habits and practices and disciplines which we can change our lives. And so then the question is, which practices do we want to actually follow? Well, the practices I'm going to talk about today are ancient practices, ones which have been around for a long, long time, centuries. But what I find really interesting is that they are also practices which are now developing a considerable amount of social science research. And so I'll talk a little bit about what some of the findings are about these practices as we go along. About 8 years ago, I was in a mess. And so the kind of things that Megan was talking about, anxiety and depression and just having my brain going all the time, and I couldn't get out of that cycle of thinking. And I really didn't know what to do about it. I went to a therapist, and I believe in therapists. They've been really helpful to me over the years, just like Megan was talking about. And I went to a therapist, and they were helpful, but I just couldn't get out of that mode. I went, and I was having coffee with a friend of mine. His name's Dave Player, and I've told this story many times, but Dave Player told me about his practice of breathing. And this practice was a practice of breathing in and breathing out and breathing in and breathing out. And it was a practice that he had learned when he'd been going through some tough times. It had helped him quite a lot. Turns out it's a practice that Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher, writes about himself. And so Dave gave me a book called Pieces Every Step, and I started practicing with fits and starts, and he encouraged me and he supported me along the way, and pretty soon I was practicing breathing every single day. Started with just a few minutes, then I went up, and today I breathe every single day, every single possible day, which is almost every day, for 20 minutes. That's my breathing practice. Now, since that time, I've moved on from actual Thich Nhat Hanh, which is words that you say, breathe in, breathe out, calm, peace, those kind of words which really help you stay centered on what's going on right there. I've moved to centering prayer, which was brought to the fore by the Catholic priest Thomas Keating. And centering prayer is a Christian prayer process where you have a sacred word that you use to bring you back. It's not a mantra, it kind of brings you back constantly to this self, this emptying self, so you can be open to the experience of being. And it's very peaceful. And it's very much, if you're of the mind to think of it this way, it's very sacred. It's very open to those influences which can come upon you. So I practiced that for quite a while, and I teach at the University of Idaho. I'm in the Adult Organizational Learning and Leadership program. And so I came back and I started thinking a lot about this practice and thinking about a number of other things and how these fit together. I ended up writing an article called The Profound Learner and thinking about how can we go deeper into our own lives, and how can we think about going into places where we can actually transform our lives by using these practices. So that one thing led to another. A colleague and I started working on this profound learning process. We wrote an article about spiritual disciplines, and then we went on to write an article about preparing profound learners. Now we're studying, me and him and some colleagues, he and I and some colleagues at the university are studying profound leadership, profound living, profound learning. So it's really grown. And so that's the part that really appeals to me, the fact that it's personally practice effective. All these long-term practices that have been around for hundreds of years are now being validated, and actually we learn how they work through social science research. A lot of it funded by places like the John Templeton Foundation. I brought some books which are going to be resources for you here today. So we're going to talk about 3 specifically today, and I'll mention the one that we'll talk about next week. So those 3 practices, which have been around for a long time, which are now developing social science research, are humility, the practice of humility, the practice of gratefulness, and the practice of generosity. Now those are all virtues. Those are all qualities that have been talked about for a long time, right? Humility, gratitude, generosity, but they've also been studied. So I could talk to you, and I'm not going to, because I don't know that much about it. I could talk to you about the research on humility. There's a whole bunch going on right now. The Handbook of Humility, a lot of talk about intellectual humility, where we don't hold tight to our beliefs and thoughts, etc. We're really open to new ideas and new ways of looking at things. But the Handbook of Humility. I'll come back to this book right here, but this is called The Paradox of Generosity, and this is research that's been done on the topic of generosity. And what we'll find is, in both those cases, plus gratefulness, is there are real benefits to practicing these activities throughout our lifetime. So let me just share with you what some of the benefits that have been proven through research for humility for these 3, plus presence. Next week we're going to talk about presence, the practice of presence, being in the present moment, being here now. That'll be the one we spend time on next week. So I'll just go through some of the findings that have been going on in the research. Just check for yourself, think for yourself how this relates to what's going on in terms of mental health in the world. Now, remember, these are activities which we can proceed in the middle of everything else going on, and over time we develop depth in. So while the mountain is being pummeled by wind and rain, we are the mountain. We are there developing those deep practices for our life. So humility, I'll start with humility. Humility according to William Temple, says humility does not mean thinking less of yourself than other people, nor does it mean having a low opinion of your own gifts. It means freedom from thinking about yourself at all. So there's a lot of research. No one's really come up with the final definition of what that concept of humility means, but it's thinking less of ourselves, or not thinking less of ourselves, but not thinking of ourselves at all. And what we'll find from all these practices is that they take us out of ourself and our inner angst about who we are as we start thinking about others and how that works for ourselves. So, according to the research, humility is proven hard to measure, but these are the results from research. People who are humble, who practice humility, have better health, improved job performance, greater relationship quality, lower defensive,ness, becoming less preoccupied with self-image. You can imagine why. If I'm a humble person, I don't care if have 5,000 tweets and everybody's putting my name in front of everybody else. I don't care that much about self-image or recognition or those kinds of, I'm humble. And related destructive outcomes. Humility, just think about this. Humility improves friendships, child rearing, self-understanding, culture of workplaces, reduces unhappiness. So that's humility, the practice of humility. And so the idea of practicing over time, and humility is one of those which, if you say, I'm a humble person, you know that I'm not, right? So becoming a humble person, really getting a handle on that pride or that narcissism or that need to be in front of people and having a humble personality is a lifetime project. But those are the benefits to it. The next one is gratitude. And gratitude, let's just ask ourselves for a second. Sometimes it feels like, I can't believe this is happening to me. I can't believe that I lost my job. I can't believe that I didn't get the raise. I can't believe this, that, or the other. And so it's easy to just spend a lot of time thinking about those kinds of things. But an attitude or really a practice of gratitude. And all these benefits derive from the practice, not just one-offs, not just I'm going to do something grateful today because something good happened to me, but a practice of doing grateful things every day, recognizing gratefulness. Starts with thinking about what are the unearned gifts that we have. Gifts that we have right now that nothing that we did could have given to us. Now just think how grateful we should be for air. How grateful we should be for the mountains. Right here in Boise, the foothills. I can walk up in the foothills for free today, take a hike, and be one with nature. Think of the unearned gifts that we have of the people who have gone before and have provided for us. Think of the folks who are developing, I work at the University of Idaho, which is a big ag school. Think of the unearned gifts we have for people that are working on our food supply. Think of all those kind of things. Now we can think about earned gifts. There are also some gifts that we have in our lives that we've earned, that we've contributed to. Great kids. We've spent time with our kids. We've helped to raise those kids. The gifts that we have is some financial security because we've invested. We've had the discipline of doing those kinds of things. So there are a lot of gifts that we've earned as well or we've contributed to earning. So if we think about that, and every day we think about what are those gifts in our lives, then we start to develop an attitude and a spirit of gratefulness in our lives, which allows us to be generous and to show other people that we're grateful and to thank them. So let me just talk about what some of the benefits of grateful practices are. There's numerous benefits, and so I'll just go over what they are right here. Including the reduction of perceived stress and depression. Now just think about what we've been talking about these last few weeks. Stress, anxiety, grief, all those things which happen to us. This is a practice which we can impact. Reduced feelings of hopelessness and increased levels of optimism, improved sleep quality, increased self-esteem, deepened spirituality, and more. So there's a number of practices related to grateful living, and one of them is grateful journaling. Another one is counting your blessings every day. There's a great little book called 99 Blessings, which Brother David Stindl Rast wrote, which I love that book. I actually gave it away, so I don't have it right now. I don't have it right now. But if you go to the Network for Grateful Living, which he founded, you will find many resources on grateful practices and living gratefully. So that's 2. That's grateful living. So the third one is generosity. And I love this paradox of generosity. And the paradox of generosity, we live in a world where we see people just trying to get things, get the latest thing, get the best thing, get the most thing, all those kind of things. But the paradox of generosity, these researchers found, is that interesting, isn't it? What this virtue is in the midst of all this other stuff is that by giving, we receive. By grasping, we lose. The more we give, the more we have a practice of generosity, not just one-off, although that's helpful, but a practice of generosity on a regular basis, the more we receive. The more we try to hold on to things, the less happy we are, the less gifts that we are given. So let me share some of the benefits of actual generosity. Practices, this is from the book, not just one-off or occasional acts of generosity result in greater well-being. The practice of generosity is positively related, meaning the practice of generosity, the more of it, the more happiness you will have, the more purpose in living, the more bodily health, the more avoidance of depression, and the more interest in personal growth. And the authors emphasize that practices are repeated behaviors that involve recurrent intention and attention. These practices are what make the difference. And the ones that they studied are the practice of voluntary financial giving, volunteering for work without pay, relational generosity, being generous in your relationships with other people, and neighborly generosity, being generous with your neighbors and friends. Also important was personally valuing the importance of being a generous person. And so when you start thinking about how important generosity is and the practice of generosity and all those things I was just telling you that you could practice on a regular basis, you start to realize that the more we give away, the more we're able to get. Now, we're going to run out of time here pretty quickly, and I want to just share some resources with you so you can start thinking about these things in practical terms. There's a lot of scholarly work on these, and I'll come back to presence next week. A lot of scholarly work on this, but there's also the experience that we have. We know what it feels like when we've given something away and someone expresses appreciation. Or in my case, I've really developed kind of an anonymous giving practice. And it's not much financial giving or anything like that, but just on a daily basis, I send something off on an anonymous to a person who doesn't know who I am. They might guess who I am, but most folks don't know who I am. And so I know every single day that someone is getting something in the mail from me that I created. And that just makes me feel good. That gives me a feeling every single day that I'm doing something with no return to me. No return to me. Now I'm mentioning it here, so there is some return for that. But I want to share it for you. I got the idea in a couple ways. One way was one winter, some neighbors came by and shoveled our sidewalk on our driveway. I didn't know who it was. And I thought to myself, who in this neighborhood has done this? All of a sudden I have a clean driveway, a clean sidewalk. I said to myself, that's amazing. My second question is, now who do I think? I didn't know who to think. So the win-win here is I had to be nice to everybody in the neighborhood, right? I had to be nice to everybody in the neighborhood. So it's a win-win. So it builds on itself. Anonymous generosity builds on itself. When you're giving away, the more you get back every day. So these are the resources I want to share. This little book called Humility. Some of the research and some of the quotes come from Everett Worthington is the one who did the scholarly work. But he's also the person who wrote this. This is a more practical book, lots of quotes, a lot of interesting information. Humility, the Quiet Virtue. This little book right here, I carried around with me for a long, long time. It's written by Robert Emmons. He's also done a lot of scholarly work, but he publishes a lot of work, and he's written this little book. He's done, if you go to the source of the, I've got it for you, it's the Good Science Center, where they study these practices. It's called, he'll publish there, but this book is called The Little Book of Gratitude, Create a Life of Happiness and Well-Being by Giving Thanks. A lot of the research, the benefits, you can read right here in this very book, and practices, and reasons why to do it, what the benefits are, etc. In this little book, you can carry it with you and you'll always have something good. This little book is a book called The Way of Gratitude, Readings for a Joyful Life. It's got Mary Oliver, James Martin, J.K. Rowling, Aureen Nowen, Joan Chittister, Thich Nhat Hanh, David Sindel Ras, and many more. This is a great little book for reading every day. This is a book by Diana Butler Bass, which I love this book, and it's called Grateful, and it's called The Transformative Power of Giving Thanks. And she talks in there about a lot of things. One of the things I learned from her was how giving and giving thanks can be transactional. And so when it's a give and take, it has less of an effect. Nothing wrong with giving, even if it's transactional. I want the thanks, but when it's higher than that, when it's at a different level than that, it can be transformational. And so that's the power of being grateful. A friend of mine, his name's Brian Taylor, used to be a doctoral student of mine. Now he's a lawyer, and he's just a great guy. He's been a mentor to me in Catholicism. And I've been a Methodist all my life. I'll be a Methodist all my life, but I've learned a lot from Catholicism from him. And he brought back to me this little gift. It's called the Trinity by Rublev. He brought this icon back to me, this picture right here. It's also if you read Father Richard Rohr's book, The Divine Dance, you'll see this picture in here too. But he brought this back to me. I didn't ask for it. It was a total surprise, and I have it on my mantle. I care about it. It's something that's important to me, not just because of that, but because he thought of me when he was in a foreign country, thinking about me and what he could give to me. In our own church, and this will be my last example, in our own church, Joy Lisk used to make prayer bracelets, and right here in this very chapel, she'd give them out. She'd have a whole basket full of them, those prayer bracelets. And if you saw her, and you know Joy, you know what a labor of love it was. It was a calling for her, and so these prayer bracelets would go out. Well, my personal story is that I took several of those. They were free. She would just give them out. I took several of those prayer bracelets, and I have given them to people over the years who I thought could really use them. And one of those prayer bracelets went with my little special needs son and my daughter, and my wife, who went to Pittsburgh for 9 months to take care of our little grandson who had an operation. And so the prayer bracelets that she made are giving generously far beyond the moment of her making that bracelet and then giving that bracelet. Now, we all have different skills, we all have different gifts, but thinking in ways of humility, how can I be of service? In ways of gratitude, how can I thank all that's around me? And then how can I say thank you to those people who have given to me? And then finally, how can I be generous? 3 practices which I think will help a lot over time immediately, because they have immediate effect, but over the long term, much more deeply. It has been a real pleasure to be here today to talk to you on Mental Health Monday. I was thinking it was Tuesday, but it's Mental Health Monday, and to be a part of this whole project here. So I want to thank the Cathedral of the Rockies. I wish you the very best in your practices moving forward, whatever they are. There's many, many practices, and so these are just 3. You can pick the ones which have the most effect, the most impact on your life, and hopefully it'll make a difference, not just now, not during this difficult time, but over a lifetime. Thank you.